Hey guys, this is Scott Horne, and I'm going to take a moment and just try to address this thing we see in the news today called squatters and squatter rights out there. So if you find the video helpful, take a moment and like it. Don't forget to comment below. We'll do our very best to answer those for you. And don't forget to take a moment and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And guys, you'll see a little picture floating around up top that has the winner of last week's 30-minute consultation free giveaway. And for those of you who comment, we're going to do a drawing once a week to have that 30-minute consultation with myself to go over your real estate business, real estate needs, real estate transaction, whatever it might be out there. So let me just take a stab at squatters. So first and foremost, you better be familiar with your landlord-tenant laws wherever it is you live. I'm in the Texas marketplace. I'm pretty familiar with that overall. Other places have very different rules and regulations out there about squatters. And, you know, nobody wants a squatter. And unfortunately, we just can't shoot them. So we got to find out, how are we going to deal with them? And I really wanted to throw a comment in there about women and business partners. I decided it was probably best not to do that, though, in this case, because it's always us guys that y'all want to shoot. Anyway, I'm kidding and just having fun there. You know, squatters are somebody who just move in a home. Now, there's a difference between someone who just improperly just moves in it and takes over a house versus someone who had been living there previously under a lease agreement, or living there under a verbal agreement, or living there under a mortgage that got foreclosed upon. Typically, those people are called tenants at sufferance or a tenant at will in sufferance. But there's a difference there, because I think the laws of your state handle those situations differently. If you foreclosed on somebody and they stay in the home holding over, they become a tenant at sufferance. And typically, the mortgage documents even call them as such. And your property code, in most instances, provide very clear-cut cases on how to deal with those situations that are pretty easy. If you have a rental agreement that maybe you terminated, or the occupant is in default, and you've terminated for whatever the reason might be, again, they're still a tenant, but they're, again, a tenant at will and sufferance, holding over after the term of the lease or after a default or being given proper notice. And again, your state's property code is going to deal with those items differently based on a state-by-state basis, but they're going to be pretty common for the most part, and they're going to be easy to deal with and easy to navigate. You just got to make sure you're using proper notices and get a good feel for that. Part of the real estate investment business isn't just always about one thing. It's not just about the wholesaling side, or it's not just about the fix and flip side. It's not just about the creative finance side. You really got to have a flavor for everything and learn all of these intricacies. Grant you, I've been very lucky being a lawyer and having dealt with thousands and thousands and thousands of evictions over the years, which is just ingrained in your head what you have to do. But you also have to stay up with your property code, because they do change from time to time along the way. If you've got a piece of property, why would somebody just arbitrarily move into it? Well, one, they have to recognize that that property is vacant first. If you've maintained your property correctly, you mow your yard on a regular basis, have lights that cut on, cut off, maybe they'll pass on by and go to the next house and avoid yours. Once you're marketing a house for sale, just because you have a marketing sign in the yard doesn't mean that the house is automatically vacant. If you have blinds, keep those blinds pulled just so they can't go around and look in windows. You never know what you can do, but sometimes preventative medicine can go a long way out there. If someone was to move in your house, so you have a property, and it doesn't matter where this property is. It could be in a high-end neighborhood. It could be in a low-end neighborhood. I think all situations happen. And guys, I saw a lot of this back in the real estate crash days. This is from starting in late 2008, going through about 2013 or 14. There were so many vacant houses sitting around. There were people out there who were taking control of a property and leasing it, even though they were owned it, and collecting a payment. And of course, the poor tenant didn't know what they were doing. They were just pocketing this money improperly. They were doing all sorts of various things in those scenarios. And so that's kind of the same thing, only different, where the squatter in that case would be the person who took control of the house and then improperly put an unwitting, unknowing tenant in the home. But if you've got a squatter, at least here in the Texas marketplace, moving in a home, the question becomes, how do they get access to that house? They'd have to break in. Well, that's breaking and entering. If it's occupied in some format, it could be a burglary charge that goes up into a felony status, I believe. And every state's going to be a little bit different in how they look at that as well. It's also trespassing if it's not theirs. So the first thing I always would do is, if I discover somebody in a home without permission and moved in, is how do they get utilities on? Or are they on? Are they pirating water? Are they pirating electricity from somewhere? I don't know. Could they be running an extension cord to their neighbor's house without the neighbor knowing about it somewhere, somehow? It's possible. All these kind of things can happen. Going to your property on a consistent basis, having someone go by there, put their eyes on it weekly, checking things out, making sure it's okay, can help to prevent situations along the way, I think. From there, the first thing I would do if someone's in the home is I'd call the police, because they're trespassing on your property. Here in Texas, for the most part, unless they have a legal right to be there, which they don't, they're going to be removed from that property. Now, could they forge some type of a document? It is possible. And if you can demonstrate through enough people, neighbors, yourself, people in your office, etc., who can stipulate that this was not the case, there is a good chance that the police will remove them anyway. There is also a chance where you may have to provide them a proper notice to vacate the home and get them out, or they have a forged lease, and get them into a court environment. I get it that may take some time to do that, but think about this also. If they don't have power onto the property because they can't turn it on without a written document in their name, which they could, and a lot of jurisdictions require a home inspection and a certificate of occupancy before they'll turn the utilities on or transfer them. Are they pirating water? Well, if they are, maybe you contact the water department, let them know what's going on, and they might go out and lock that meter. Sometimes constructive eviction, things like that, can help to get them out where they don't have power or water. Maybe you discover that they're pirating power from a neighbor's home. You advise that neighbor, they get things unplugged, and maybe they actually call the police for theft of the utilities. And there could be an arrest in that scenario. So you've got to take a minute and think outside the box of all the various things you can do. Along the way, if there is a forged document, you have to know what your rights are, provide a proper notice, file an eviction suit. You can't just go down and file a suit. You got to give notice properly so you're complying with the property code of your state, and let that run its course. Usually you can be in a courtroom anywhere from 10 to 21 days. So there could be some downtime along the way. Remember, this is still your home. You have the right to be out there. You have the right to be in the yard. You have the right to mow that yard, trim the hedges. You also have the right to have a key to the property and change the locks. If they don't give you a key, you have the right to do those kind of things, and you have the right to inspect that house at reasonable times whenever you want to do so. So again, sometimes being that squeaky wheel, that little thorn in their side, they don't want you there. They're trying to hide from everybody. And the more times you're there, the more effort you're putting into it, the more opportunity that you'll have that they will just leave and get out. The more times the police keep showing up. These people don't want to be arrested. They're hiding from the law. They have other issues ongoing, which is why they're doing what they're doing. So I think being consistent, staying on top of those issues can always help. Now, at the end of the day, you may wind up in eviction court in the worst scenario, in which case they have to prove up not only do they have a signed lease that you signed or someone who had the authority to sign that lease signed, did they pay rent? Demonstrate you paid rent. If they paid cash, where's their receipts? For instance, in my offices, we don't accept cash. Money order, check, ACH deposit. So there's always a record of that deposit. It's on my bank statements. It's easily to be found. And if they don't have it, your testimony, along with maybe your bookkeeper's testimony or whatever it might be, your manager's testimony, is sufficient to win the day in the justice court or whatever court it might be in where you are. Now, could they appeal that initial eviction action to a higher court? Well, here in Texas, they can, meaning there could be an additional delay. So in many cases, they have to post a cash bond in order to appeal, unless they go through what's called an affidavit of inability to pay, or a pauper's affidavit. Now, in that case, you can also get them in court and force them to prove up an inability to pay. You can get them on the stand and ask questions. Where do they live beforehand? How did they get into the property? Where's the lease? You can go through all these kind of things with them. You can ask them to demonstrate their bank accounts, their income, where they work, what are they making? And you can force them to bring things to the table that you can get access to and copies of that might be detrimental to them. And again, there's many ways of navigating these things that can force the issue, because the last thing they're going to do is provide you copies of their banking statements or other financial information that may or may not demonstrate their ability to pay the rent. Now, if somehow they get through all of these steps along the way and they wind up going to that next higher court, for instance, here in Texas, it's the county court, which is the final court, unless they want to go up to a court of appeals. At the county court level, it might take a few weeks to get there. And there's some games you can play too. Maybe they have to post a bond to get into the county court somewhere, somehow. Maybe the underlying court here in Texas, the justice court, gave them a very small bond amount to pay for some reason, which happens once in a while. It's supposed to be 2 times the amount of the rental. So for instance, if the rent was $2,000 a month as per that lease, it's supposed to be $4,000, not just $500. So knowing to ask for the proper amount is very important. So if they can't post that bond, they file a pauper's affidavit, it goes to court. Be proactive. Get that court to set that hearing as fast as possible. Find any way you can to facilitate moving the paperwork from the justice court per se to the county court, so you can get that court date set and show up. Now you're in a court of record, meaning they're on the stand. There is going to be a court reporter, and they're under sworn testimony. So most of these people, if you put them in a situation like that, they don't want to be up there committing perjury, committing fraud in an area that can be directly actionable both by the court and or by the authorities in some format. So knowing how to navigate this is so important. Now, maybe that involves you learning the landlord-tenant process, the eviction process. One of the things I did, guys, 100 years ago, was I got a copy of the Texas Apartment Association's manual for landlord-tenant law, and it had all of the laws for Texas landlord-tenant in one place. The book was only about this thick, and it had a lot of write-up. There is no way you're going to read that whole thing and remember it along the way, but it allowed me to start reading it and to start trying to understand what the rules and regulations were in Texas for landlord-tenant law. And it gave you suggestions for notices and various things along the way. From there, a lot of times this is learned unless you get a good attorney working with you who does nothing but this professionally. And for instance, in my case, after having done thousands and thousands and thousands of evictions, you kind of get it. And there's some self-help things that you can do within the bounds of the law. There are other things, as we discussed, like with utilities that you might be able to do that are legal and correct. Because if they're not paying for utilities, they don't have the right to have utilities on. And in most states, you don't have a legal requirement to provide them utilities. Again, it's kind of hard to live in a house like this, in any house without utilities on, although I've seen it done, unfortunately, and the consequences aren't good. Understanding all the steps you can do, both in the initial lower court and maybe the upper court along the way. Understanding that this is still your home. You have the right to have access. You have a right to have keys. Knowing how to post proper notices for those kind of things on the doors. Gaining access to your house. Interfering in whatever it is they're trying to do or their process along the way can all be beneficial. Now, don't ever cross over that line of self-help and force them out of a situation where you could be held liable for something, whether it's civil or criminal. Again, that's where knowledge is power, and talking with the right attorney and or being very, very proficient at this yourself will help you out. So guys, I hope that you found this interesting and a little bit helpful about squatters and maybe some ways of moving them out. And I understand that every jurisdiction is going to be a little bit different out there. So if you found this video helpful, take a moment and like it, guys. Make any comments. We'll do our very best to answer those for you. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once a week, we're going to draw from all those who have commented in all of our videos. And maybe that will be you to be that lucky winner to have that 30-minute free consultation with me. And I'll look forward to having time to talk to you about whatever it is you want to talk about, your real estate company, your real estate business, whatever it might be. Guys, we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time.